UFC 327 is in the books. It took me a minute to get this going because I have not done a breakdown in a long time. I completely forgot how to even use the damn OBS software. I've been sitting here trying to get this up and running. But we are back. We have a new setup. I'm so excited to do this because I have not done a full breakdown or a video in about a year. But we are back. UFC 327, another great event. It lacked some star power at the top. I know they had a hard time selling tickets. It seemed like the arena didn't look fully packed out like it has the last couple years, but the fights delivered, and that's what matters most. Let me pull up this card so we can get into the results. Give me 1 second. We're gonna go to, oh, there we go. There we go. We back in it. Back in it. Maximize full screen, entire screen. Bang. Okay. I feel like starting from the top. So that is what we are going to do. UFC 327 Prochazka versus Ulberg. Man, I'm not gonna lie to you. Going into the fight, I picked Jiri. My reasoning, I felt like Jiri, obviously, if you look at the records, way more experience, way more fights, way more high level fights. Overall, but especially in the UFC. I just felt like Ulberg the last couple years he hasn't looked the most impressive. The main one to me was in the Jan fight. That was like his chance to really put a stamp on why he should be getting a title shot. And now I get it. Jan is very hard to look good against. If you remember Jan, when Pereira first went up to light heavyweight, Jan was his first fight that went to a decision, and Pereira did not look like the Pereira we're used to seeing. And that is because Jan is so tough, durable, well-rounded, just very hard to look good against. And I know how good Olberg is, as far as his athleticism, his speed, his power, but Yuri, the only guy who's been able to beat him has been Alex, and Alex, seemingly beats everybody outside of his Ankalaev fight, where he apparently was sick and also had a broken hand, and the Izzy fight at 185, which was amazing. But we know how big Alex is, and that weight cut definitely drains him. So, yeah, going into this, I just felt like Yuri was the more proven guy, and it kind of felt like this was setting up to be his crowning moment. Miami was rooting for him hard. Everyone, how do you not love Yuri? If you don't love Yuri, you love watching Yuri. He's definitely probably the number one or number two most exciting fighter in the sport, just pure entertainment wise. I'd say him and Justin Gaethje. But yeah, starting off the fight, Ulberg was doing what he usually does, stays on the outside. It was clear he was trying to chop down Yuri's lead leg because Yuri is so heavy lunging in on that front leg. That's kind of how he gets his offense going when he blitzes in and out of range. And anyone who's fighting Yuri, I would imagine the tape you're going to watch is the two Alex Pereira fights, and probably now his fight with Khalil, where Khalil, I would say, clearly won those first 2 rounds before Yuri just laid it on him. But yeah, the way you fight Yuri, you have to attack that lead leg because you have to limit his mobility, or else he's going to be bouncing in and out of range on you the whole time. And Oberg looked to do that. Yuri was pressing him up against the cage a lot, and so Oberg was kind of rotating behind the black lines. And that's usually not where you want to be, but it allowed Oberg to implement his game plan. He was staying out of range and chopping down Yuri's lead leg, and the whole time he was doing that, what was he looking for? He was looking for that check left hook. The commentary team kept talking about it the whole time, but that has proven to be something that obviously that's like Olberg's number one weapon, but it's also something that Yuri has been caught with before. In the Alex fight, the first one specifically, I think the left hook was more of a weapon. The second time around, we know Alex landed some really nasty head kicks on him. But the number one key is obviously limit Yuri's mobility. And Ulberg was looking good. Both guys, I would say it was a pretty close first round. And then they got into an exchange where Ulberg had to put weight on his back leg. And you immediately see a big reaction from him where something happened. Either his knee blew out, I think that's what they're saying, but you see his calf pop. Usually that's like an Achilles issue, a torn Achilles, but they're saying he blew his ACL out. That was probably 2 minutes into the fight, and as soon as that happened, it was clear that Yuri was on the hunt and that Ulberg was extremely vulnerable. It kind of just felt like a matter of time until the fight. Either Yuri was going to find a finish because Ulberg couldn't move, or it was going to get stopped in between rounds. And we all saw what happened. Yuri kind of lunges in, looking to land a combination on Ulberg, and Ulberg wings that check left hook with his back up against the fence, drops Yuri, and finishes him with ground and pound. And it's tough for Yuri because he's so good, um, but he has proven to have vulnerabilities with his style, up to a certain point. And I thought Alex was probably like the only guy who was elite enough to expose that. But Ulberg was able to land that left hook, and that's a clear vulnerability in Yuri's style. His hands down as he comes in. There was also this, we all know how Yuri is with his like Bushido code, and he's like a samurai. And he spoke on it, at the end of the fight, that he felt mercy for Ulberg. I mean, how much stock I put into that, I don't know, because at the end of the day, like you're in a fight and you make decisions while you're in there that you have to live with. But I mean, I can see that knowing how Yuri is because you even saw him start to try to point down, being like, "I see that your knee is hurt. We're gonna stand here. We're gonna stand in front of each other since you can't move." But that's just a bad decision to make. You're in control of the fight now, whether it was from something you intended to do or not. Your opponent is weak, and you should be able to take advantage of that. And it's just a boneheaded decision to stand in front of a guy, especially with the speed and power of Ulberg. I don't really even know what to say about Ulberg because we know those are things we already knew that he had. Um, just being that big and his size, to have that speed and power, you're gonna compete in the top five of the light heavyweight division, always if you're that big and fast. But I really didn't learn anything new about him. I really wanted to see what would happen if this fight went into the later rounds, and I feel like that was kind of what we were on pace for. Um, but we just didn't get to see it. So Olberg, it's amazing for him to be able to win the belt on one leg essentially, but there's still unanswered questions. What would have happened if this went into the second, third, and fourth round where we know Yuri has all that experience and really starts to just go downhill on you? And I'm starting to think, you know, that Yuri's chin may not. Obviously, he got hit clean, and every time he's been knocked out, it's like a clean shot that you can't judge a guy for going down from. But I do wonder all the damage he has taken in the last couple years, if that is starting to catch up to him. Because Yuri, it seemed like after the second Alex fight, he cleaned up his style a little bit and started to use more head movement, the slips into the counters you really saw in the Khalil fight. But he still fights in such a, I I don't want to say reckless way, but I don't know what other your word to use for it than it is reckless. You know, if you guys remember, there was a time where Justin Gaethje, obviously, I know they fight extremely differently, but the mentality is similar in certain regards. Like when Justin Gaethje first had he made his UFC debut and beat Michael Johnson. But then he had two back-to-back losses to Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. And when he came back, he cleaned up his style because he always used to say he'll never take a step back. He'll never, take himself out of the fire and make the correct decision just because he wanted to fight in such a aggressive, ruthless way. That's how he fought. But after those two fights, he came back with a more cleaned up style where he would cut angles, he would reset. He still fights in an insane way, but just little changes allows him to take less damage and make better decisions in the fights and win the fights. And that's the goal at the end of the day. And I feel like Yuri is gonna really have to do that and think about that if he wants to be the world champion. Because I feel like Yuri has all the skills. It's really just he exposes himself and can make poor decisions at times. I don't know what else to say about that. It sucks for him. That post-fight interview was a little bit heartbreaking, you know, in some ways. Like at the end of the day, they live and die by the sword, but he just had a daughter, or he's having a daughter, and you could tell that it was like really hitting him, in the interview with Joe. But yeah, Ulberg, I mean, he looked good. Got a sick knockout in a fight that it seemed like was over and that he was about to lose. Now the UFC has problems because their new light heavyweight champion has a blown out ACL. He's gonna have to get surgery. He's gonna have to do therapy, and you're probably looking at, I would say, at least 9 months before he fights again. And the division has been stagnant, and that's been, the major problem. And now you had a great fight with a great finish, and you have a new champion who didn't lose to Alex Pereira, so that's great for the division that your champion now didn't lose to the prior champion, which would have been the case with Yuri, but now you're gonna have to wait because he has a blown out ACL. So we'll see what happens. Co-main event: Azamat Mirzakhanov and Paulo Costa. I'll be completely upfront. I wanted Paulo to win because I just
Your
felt
life
like,
is defined by the adventures you
hey,
take.
what are we
At JL
doing?
Lexus, we help make every
What do we got
adventure an
going on?
A-plus experience. From the luxury, technology.
They hit me with a little ad, and I'm not about to edit that out. Like I was saying, I wanted Paulo Costa to win because I feel like, Osmat is newer and he was undefeated. He was ranked number 6. He had time to keep establishing himself and come back. And I think actually, how old is Osmat? I think oh, he's 37. I don't know why I thought he was a bit younger than that. He definitely looks 37. But regardless, he's newer to the UFC. He's 16-1 now. This was he knocked out Rakic, which is a good win, but Rakic I feel like hasn't been the same the last couple years. Um, he was, a contender at one point, but I just feel like it's ever since that Yuri fight, he hasn't really done much. So that was still a great win for Osmat, but this was in my opinion, a interested Paulo Costa who actually wants to fight. Yo, son, what are we doing? Tank, get out of here. No. Go lay down. Go lay down. Damn, bro. You're messing up the video. Okay, we're back. Had to do a little intermission right there. We're back. Had to do a little intermission right there. Paulo Costa, though, went up to light heavyweight. Apparently, Osmat was having a hard time getting fights, and Paulo Costa seems to be okay with going in between weight classes. And he is a big dude who I think can make a run at light heavyweight as long as his cardio's on point, carrying the extra size. But like I said, I wanted Paulo to win just because I feel like when he's on point and when he actually cares about fighting, things are more interesting. He's a fun character in the sport. He's pretty known because he's had, big fights, Izzy, Sean Strickland. He's been in there with lots of guys. The Luke Rockhold fight, which everyone has seen. This honestly might have been his biggest win because if you really think about it, he, I can't think of who his best win would be outside of this. He went up 20 pounds and beat the number six ranked light heavyweight. He looked good in the Kopylov fight. I guess you could say the Yoel Romero win. That's, a great win, and that's when Yoel was still Yoel. But in this, honestly, he put more of the pieces together. It wasn't just about him being a tank. He was still a tank, he's always going to be a tank, but he looked kind of more similar like he did in the Kopylov fight. He's not just coming forward trying to run over his opponent. He's able to stay on the outside, throw the leg kicks, throw the body kicks, and mix it up at range better than I've seen him do. And honestly, that first round, I thought he clearly won. He landed the better shots, but he was getting pressured crazy, and it's very hard to keep your cardio in a good place when you're fighting on the back foot. Because when you're fighting on the back foot, usually that means that you are not in control of the tempo of the fight. So Azamat was able to put his game plan in place and push him back. And if you don't want to go backwards, it's very draining going backwards. It's just like if you don't want to be in the clinch, it's very draining to have to fight in the clinch if all you're doing is trying to get out of it. Um, and so you saw in the second round, his gas tank started to fade, and that was a round for Ozmat. But then in that third round, I'm thinking that, all right, Paulo had a good first round. This is going to go kind of how I thought it would. He was going to get tired, and Azamat's probably just going to piece him up and maybe finish him, but probably go to a decision. But no, Paulo Costa comes out of the corner in that third round, and he's throwing heat. He's throwing body kicks, he's smashing head kicks, and the final two where he threw a big head kick that it seemed like it probably broke Azamat's forearm or his wrist or something, and he wasn't able to hold it up. He wasn't really able to throw it. And then Paulo lands another one that he wasn't able to fully block. And you saw it kind of wrapped around a little bit. And then Azamat stands there for a second, turns, and falls. Paulo looked good, man. I mean, I guess we'll see. If I was him, I think he should stay at light heavyweight. I think he has a better shot of fighting the guys at light heavyweight. If his goal is to become champion, I think light heavyweight has better matchups for his style than middleweight does. And light heavyweight is it's got older guys who are more action oriented for the most part. You have Khalil, you have Jiri, you have Ulberg, who, won't be fighting for a while, but Ulberg is also a guy who likes to stay on the feet and he is older. Middleweight, you have Hamzat, obviously. You have all the guys that have beat you already if you're Paulo. Strickland's there. I guess a big fight. If Izzy fights again, he could do like the Izzy rematch. But does he really want to go out there and fight like Joe Pyfer, or any of like the young up or Brendan Allen? Like, I don't know. I think light heavyweight's more interesting for him, and I think he should stay there and try to make a run. It was good to see him back in full form. We haven't seen that in a couple years, it feels like. Ever since the Izzy loss, honestly, it just feels like he's never been able to get his feet back under him. But that's 2 wins in a row, and I think that is probably the biggest win of his career, especially at the point he's at. To get a win up a weight class against the number 6 contender puts him in a great spot. Curtis Blades, Josh Hokett, there's not much to say about this other than that is, I think, 100% going to be fight of the year, even though there's still a lot of time left in 2026. I don't see any fight beating that. Just the fact that you have two, look at these numbers: 214 total strikes, 181, 174, 177 significant strikes, 151 to the head, 164 to the head. These are just unreal numbers for heavyweights. That fight was insane. The fact that obviously they were both, Hokett especially, was more gassed going into that second round, but he ended up winning it, and then he clearly won the third. I thought it was a decisive decision for him. I thought he won rounds 2 and 3. But for him to come out in that first round and just lay it on Curtis, and Curtis still be able to win that fight, win that round rather, was insane to me. Um, yeah, heavyweight needed this. Like, whether you like Josh Hokett or not, whether you think he's corny or not, you can't deny that the man can fight. Like, he definitely reminds me, obviously not as high level of a wrestler, but it's kind of like the DC build for heavyweight. And I'm not talking old DC that won the UFC heavyweight belt. I'm talking like Strikeforce DC, who was like 235, 240, and was just way faster, way quicker, and sharper than all these big heavyweights. And that's what Hokett has going for him, on top of his, athleticism and his collegiate football and wrestling career. The guy is a much better athlete than probably anybody at heavyweight. Um, Obviously, you have guys like Gon and Tom who are athletic as well, but I would say Hokett might be faster than both of them. And what do we get right after that fight? They announced Derek Lewis versus Josh Hokett for the White House card. So, and I think it'll be fun, but the point Derek Lewis is at now, obviously he can always catch you, but Josh Hokett should knock him out in the first round. Like the way Derek Lewis has been looking, I think now maybe Derek gets some magical superpowers, fighting on the White House lawn in front of his boy Donnie. But if I'm betting on that fight, I'm betting on Josh Hokett by knockout. Insane fight, sick fight. Dominic Reyes and Johnny Walker, snooze fest. They really messed up there, because if one of them would have done just a little bit more, it would have been clear, and they could have put themselves in a better standing at light heavyweight. And light heavyweight really needs it right now, and this was just like both guys kind of looked terrible. Um, Not much to say about that one at all. It was a That's one of those fights that you expect a first round knockout, second round knockout, or a war, and it turns into a snooze fest, and that's like the worst scenario possible. And that's what we got. You never really want to see Johnny Walker go into a decision. It's not usually a great fight if that happens. So I would say, even though Dom ended up winning, I don't think it was a good night at the office for both of them. Obviously, winning's better than losing, but for where they're at in their careers, it was pretty shitty for both guys. Cub, Swanson, Nate Landwehr. I was so happy to see Cub win and go out like that. Um, for newer fans, if you don't know, Cub is the last fighter from the WEC that was on the UFC's roster, and so that era is officially over. WEC was known for the lighter weight classes, Jose Aldo, Cub Swanson, Dominic Cruz, Mighty Mouse, Uriah Faber, even Ben Henderson, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, like so many guys came from WEC into the UFC, and this is officially closing the chapter on that era. Dustin Poirier, another guy, Cub 42, to go out there and just look that sharp and lay it on Nate Landwehr like that was awesome. Cub has such a fun, like, I almost want to say like a gorgeous fighting style to watch where, he's got his hands down, he's looking for different angles, he lunges in. They asked Cub, this is years ago when he first, I think, got into the UFC and people started to know who he was, how he would describe his style. And he said beautiful destruction. And that, I think, is the perfect way to describe how Cub fights. Just super action oriented, all the time, on the feet, on the ground. He's always looking for something. And just, I don't think Cub has ever had a bad fight. Like, no one has ever, like, oh, that was a shitty Cub fight. Or no one's ever like, Cubs fighting. Like, no, every time Cub Swanson fights, you want to tune in and you want to watch. Amazing career. Never won a belt, obviously, but was always, for most of his career, like a perennial contender. Always kind of hovering in that, I'd say, like anywhere from 7 to like 3 range. Cub was always in the mix and always had great fights. And no one ever has anything bad to say about Cub. So he seems just like a good guy in the sport. Patricio Pitbull and Aaron Pico. I picked Aaron Pico to win this fight. Aaron Pico is so good and so talented. He just doesn't. I think it's clear to say he doesn't have a good chin. How bad it is, I don't know. Because whenever he gets knocked out, he literally puts himself in the worst positions possible and gets too over aggressive and gets hit with like the cleanest shit you could ever imagine. Um, when I was watching the Lerone Murphy fight, I was like, there's a very good chance he's gonna walk into something because I've watched him since his very first fight in Bellator, and that's always been his, I guess, weakness, you would say. Um, he has such a pressure heavy style, which is great when he wins, but guys that are good enough have been able to capitalize on it and just catch him clean and put him out cold. Whenever he gets knocked out, it's terrible. But this fight, he looked really good. He mixed everything up well, on the feet and into the grappling with the takedowns. Patricio did land clean on him a couple times, and he was able to take it, which was good. Every time something got close to his chin, I was like, oh. But he landed some his right hand was money tonight. That right uppercut he landed on Patricio too. He was super on point. I think both of these guys, obviously Pico's still he's only 29, I think. If he puts some more wins together, like he can definitely compete for a belt. Patricio, I hope the UFC keeps him around because he can be in very fun action type fights, especially with like some older vets. He always has great fights. It sucks that he came over to the UFC when he was already like 37 because Patricio Pitbull, if you never watched him at his peak in Bellator, um, he beat a prime Michael Chandler, knocked him out. He was a two-weight world champion in Bellator with a lot of good wins. And yeah, if he would have came over when he was younger, I think we would have been able. I'm not saying he would have been the champ, but he definitely would have been towards the top of the division at 145. But Pico, great win for him to be able to get his first W in the UFC. And this was a fight that people had wanted to see. If you watch Bellator, people wanted to see this fight for years, so it was good that they got it in before Patricio retires. Kevin Holland and Randy Brown. Kevin Holland's another guy that I am always so skeptical of because whenever I pick him, he loses. Whenever I don't pick him, he wins. And that's another thing that happened tonight. I thought Randy Brown was going to win just because Kevin Holland's last couple fights, what did he have? The D-Rod fight and the Mike Malott fight, where obviously he got fouled like to oblivion, I'm pretty sure, in the Mike Malott fight. That was the Mike Malott fight, right? Yeah. He chose to continue fighting. That's on him. But um, yeah, there's always just whenever Kevin Holland loses, it's some fucking weird shit. But he looked super on point tonight. He pretty much dominated Randy Brown. Randy Brown is super solid veteran guy at this point. Beats some good guys, loses to good guys, but he's never, an easy fight. But Kevin Holland made it look easy for the most part. I thought he was going to get the finish with that Darce. It didn't happen, and he ended up winning a decision. At this point, I know he called out he wants rematches with D Rod and Mike Malott. They could do those. I know D Rod is out of prison now, so they could run that one back. Yeah, Kevin has one of those guys that you look at and you're like, he has so much potential with his whole skill set, his frame, especially at 170. But it seems like he's never cared enough to put it together to make like a real run. He just kind of wants to have fun, and that's fine. It's like the Cowboy Cerrone method. Um, yeah, looked good. He looked good tonight. That was good for him to get back in the win column. This one, Gamrot versus Ribovics. I picked Ribovics. I knew it was a risk because this was like a major step up in competition for him, and Gamrot dominated and ended up getting the finish with an arm triangle. Ribovics is still so young. He'll be back, and I think he'll be very good in this division for a long time, and he'll definitely learn from that Gamrot loss. So you could put Esteban anywhere that you want. I'm sure they'll give him someone and take a step back from that level. Gamrot, I don't know where he goes because it seems like guys who are coming up into like the top 15 and top 10 don't really want to fight him because he's a super tough out. And then it seems like the guys at the top of the division never really want to give him a shot because he's not the biggest name. And he is, a tough fight. But he hasn't really been able to get over that hump. His biggest win, obviously, is the Armin Sarukian win. That's like, I think that was Armin's last loss. I think if that fight happened now, it would go differently. But Gamrot's always tough. I guess if you wanted to, they could run back like the Dan Hooker one. They could do Gamrot versus Patty, maybe. Um, he lost to Charles Oliveira before this. It's tough. I don't know. BSD, I just don't think guys don't want to fight back in the rankings. So that's why it's a tough thing to pick a matchup for him and figure out exactly where he goes. Let's look at the lightweight rankings actually and see. See lightweight type lightweight rankings. Ilya, Justin, Armin, Charles, Max. There, Max is too big of a name. I think they're saving him for Connor anyway. Gamrot. You could do Gamrot versus Moicano, even though they're teammates. Moicano joked about that. Gamrot versus Hoofy. I don't know if they want to do that to Hoofy after his fight with BSD. Um, Oh no, Hoofy's fighting Chandler on the White House card. That's rough. See, like all these guys in front of Gamrot, I don't think that they're gonna want to fight him. They're just not gonna want to give him the shot. They could Patty and Gamrot. I would like that fight. I just don't know if they're gonna do that because Patty's such a big name. But you see what I mean? Looking at the names in here, like I don't see anyone in front of Gamrot that he would fight except maybe Dan Hooker. But then it's like, does Dan want to do that because he has a win over him? Um, and does he want to fight another grappler? He's fought fucking Armin and BSD back to back. Like that's pretty shitty. Armin, BSD, and then Gamrot. Even though you have a win over him, it was a super tough fight. Yeah, I don't know where they go for Gamrot. Tatiana Suarez and Lupi Godinez. Tatiana Suarez looked really good. She ended up getting the rear naked choke finish, and she kind of had a tough first round. She ended up taking Lupi down and having control time and landing some shots. So she definitely ended up winning that first round. But Lupi came out super hot and fast and put it on Tatiana for a second. But Tatiana did what she does. Um, let's see who she could fight next because she lost to Zhang. She's number two. I mean, Jillian Robertson deserves a big fight. I feel like they could do that if they want to give Tatiana another title shot. Honestly, I think Mackenzie, her grappling is good enough to negate a lot of the wrestling. I think, and then I think she's a lot better on the feet. So I think she would end up beating Tatiana. But that was a good win for Tatiana. She looked good. She looked dominant. Looked like her old self before all the injuries. This fight, um, I don't know if you guys saw, but it ended up being declared a majority draw. So Buffer had another incident of announcing the outcome incorrectly. Buffer's having a tough run. I thought that Padilla won. That has to be the worst feeling in the world when you get announced the victor and then they go back and say, never mind, buddy. That was a draw. That was a good fight, though. Vicente Luque and Kelvin Gastelum. Um, Vicente going up to middleweight. He was getting pushed back by Gastelum a lot at first, and then he ended up getting that anaconda. Vicente has always been really technical. I don't know, I guess he's older, and so going up to 185 to fight Gastelum is not a bad idea. You don't have to cut weight, and you're fighting a guy who's a blown up 170. Um, and he looked good doing it. He dropped Kelvin with that nice combination. His back again. He was up against the fence, getting pressed back, and then I want to say he landed a right hand left hook to sit Kelvin down. I can't remember exactly. And then from there, he was able to ride it out for a second, and then he found the anaconda, and that is Luque's signature choke, the anaconda and the darce. If you remember, he got Tyron Woodley with a darce, I believe. Yeah, he looked good. I don't know if he's gonna stay at middleweight. I guess he could. I definitely think he's outsized up there. And the Kelvin one just made sense because Kelvin is a small middleweight. But yeah, Vicente Luque, it seemed like he was getting close to retiring and getting close to the end because he's taken a lot of damage and he was on like a three fight losing streak at one point. But this is a good win for him. I mean, Kelvin is always a pretty tough fight. He's always in the fight. He's got fast hands, good power. But if you're really good at this point, you're usually beating Kelvin. Kelvin's another guy who I feel like never fully lived up to his potential. I feel like if he could have been more disciplined and stayed at 170, he could have. I don't know if he would have been world champion, but I think he would have been a perennial contender there. At middleweight, I know he had the Izzy fight. And he's fought everyone at middleweight and always, been in the fight. But just feel like his career could have been a lot better if he stayed at welterweight. Charles Radke picked up a pretty dominant decision. That was a good win for him. Charles Radke likes to, make headlines, if you know what I mean. He has some interesting quotes, if you can remember. But yeah, that was UFC 327. That was the whole card. What do we have coming up next for the UFC? I don't know. Oh, we got Burns versus Malott. Is that next? What day is that? That's this weekend. Gilbert Burns, Mike Malott, Kyler Phillips, Charles Jourdain. I like Charles Jourdain. It's got a really funny social media. Yeah, they're in Canada, so they have a lot of Canadian fighters, obviously. Um, I'm sure it'll be a, okay card. Not super deep, but I always watch Gilbert, so that'll be fun. I am glad to be doing these videos again, and you will see me a lot more now that I have a full setup going again since I moved. Took a whole year to get back into it, but we are here nonetheless. That was my UFC 327 breakdown. There's going to be a lot more improvements for the channel, and I hope to grow this thing as much as possible. So, whoever has decided to watch, I appreciate you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.